Where does the Dagda's story end? Well, Dagda Ívog is Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School. And this is a cast or question that we kind of get asked in a number of different ways. In a lot of cases, like, well, there's the story about, like, the Dagda dying from his wounds, a wound that he took in the Second Battle of Moytura. But then there's the talk about him becoming king in Ireland and ruling 50 years. But then during the Ulster Cycle, there isn't really mention of the Dagda. When we get to the Fenian Cycle, he's barely mentioned at all, if even. When you get down to the Cycle of Kings, he's only sometimes listed. So where did his story end? And a lot of people find it hard to find the Dagda. And they ask the question, like, where did he go? What happened to him? And we have had a question similarly phrased along this theme from one of our patrons. So thank you very much, those who support us over on Patreon. And this person is wondering, I've started to reach out to the Dagda. So I've also been paying attention to his appearance in the stories. Since the Dagda has so many names, is it possible that he, over time in the stories, absorbs traits of smaller local deities or other deities? Or maybe it's the other way around, and he's just known by other names in different places. Um, so the answer, not hard to say. The Dagda is oddly very, very present, very prominent, and very powerful when we are dealing with the mythological cycle. But when we get into the Ulster cycle, it's almost like he's a sideline character, if even mentioned at all. And then it's only his children and grandchildren who, after the mythological cycle into the Fenian cycle, who have a seeming impact on the narrative. Although over time, it seems maybe he is still there, but not there. So the question really is, where did the Dagda go? And so what do we have of the information that we can look at? So when we talk about the Ireland's mythological cycle, there are a number of different things known as recensions. These are versions of the stories. And in one version of the story, the Dagda suffered a wound during the Second Battle of Moytura from a woman warrior of the Fomorians. And he is said to have carried that wound, and it is that wound that later killed him. And by later, it's a long while later, because at the time of the Second Battle of Moytura, Lou is the king in Ireland, and it says that Lou rules Ireland for 40 years. So he becomes the king in Ireland on the run up to the Second Battle of Moytura. Nuada steps aside. Lou takes the seat of power, seat of kingship, sorry, because there are many different seats of different power. But he takes the seat of kingship and he rules for 40 years. The Dagda then becomes king after Lou and rules for 80 years. And so it's then said that in this version, he dies of a wound that he took 120 years previously during the Second Battle of Moytura, or well, approximately 120 years previously. Now, again, resilience, like if any guy is able to shoulder and carry it on, uh, maybe it's him. Um, but that's the stories of his death. Now, the stories of death amongst the two of the Danann are common, but don't seem to stick. Even Lou, who is slain by the three sons of Cian, son of the Dagda, um, sorry, three sons of Kermit. Apologies. There's two versions. One is Cian Lewis being son of Cian. I'm getting my genealogy confused, but essentially the three sons of Kermit kill Lou, and then in order to make up for him having killed their father, even though their father Kermit had been brought back to life by the Dagda, who has a power over life and death from picking up the club, they still deal with the dishonor of it all, and they battle against Lou, who then takes some wounds and then flees into a lake and then he drowns. Lou is then said to be buried on the hill of Ushnock, I believe it is. I'll have to double check myself on that. But the three grandsons of the Dagda, in this instance, become the three kings of Ireland. They become Machin, Machecht, and Magren at the time when the end of the mythological cycle is approaching and the Milesians arrive. But the Dagda is not gone from the narrative. So even though he is not, as I said, in one version he's dead, in this other version he's still mentioned because when Amergin comes along and facilitates the exchange of power between the two of the Danann and the Milesians, they kind of do it by linguistic trickery, essentially, but they still take dominance in Ireland. But Ireland becomes a wasteland because it's not in right relationship. It's not maintaining that sovereignty bond with the other world. And the only way to restore that is for the Milesians to make friends with the Dagda. So, despite the fact that he is this prominent deity, he's always this deity who seems to be supporting or the narrative of other people and driving things along. How is it that such a powerful deity who has authority over and land, sea, sun, and moon, not sky, he's not a sky daddy, um, seems to disappear, seems to kind of fade out of the narrative? I'll loop to like the question of who was writing the narrative a little bit later on, but essentially he's gone, but he's not gone because we get the settling of the Manor Tara, we get the arrival of the Milesians leading to the Tuatha De Danann going in through the Hollow Hills or the She Mounds to become the people of the She or the Es She in the other world. Um, we then finish out with the mythological cycle and we get into the stories of the Ulster Cycle. And in the Ulster Cycle, there is mention of men who are associated with the Morrigan, but they don't carry the name Dagda. There is a story where Cuchulainn, the Morrigan is bringing a cow out of the other world into Ulster to facilitate the birth of the Fionn Vanach, essentially. Um, and she's said to be accompanied by a big red man. Now, the translations of the story talk about Cuchulainn coming and he's kind of having this animosity kind of talk, but the man doesn't respond. He directs his conversation to the man, but the man won't speak to him. The woman responds, and then he responds to her, and instead of her responding back, the man responds instead. And so Cuchulainn is put in this position of like, who am I actually talking to? And he gets all shirty about it. That man isn't mentioned, but he's said to be a red man. Um, Now, one of the other Dagda's names, to go back to this person's question, is the fact that he has so many names. One of them is Rua Rofasa, which is the red one or the fiery one of great knowledge and wisdom. So, is it possible that this red man accompanying the Morrigan is none other than her husband and partner, the Dagda, going by his descriptor as the red man, as opposed to the naming of the Dagda? Hard to say for sure. I can't actually say the answer. This is easy to say because there's nothing else to corroborate or to validate that. Now, stepping to the left into my personal experiences, a personal gnosis of it, I do believe it is personally that it is the Dagda. He is there in the narrative. He is still carrying things forward and moving it further along. Now, this does show that there are a number of others, there are a couple of other individuals throughout other narratives which seem Dagda shaped, or they're not said to be the Dagda. Now, when we go back to the mythological cycle, the arrival of the Fomorians for their invasion, the Dagda does give his name in the form of a Rosk poem. A Rosk poem being one of the oldest forms of linguistic structure that we have in Old Irish, which is great. But it's a little bit convoluted in its meaning, and it is this for Ben, Bruch, Brugal, Bromage, it is this flowing, linking linguistic expression of descriptors as opposed to anims or names. It is these themes or descriptors that flow one into the other and change their meaning as they flow one into the other to define almost by these adjectives who and what this man is, who and what the Dagda is. We know the Dagda has another name, like his name is Uchid. He is referred to as Uchid, and Uchid is a very common name. You may as well throw a stone and find an Uchid in the mythology as you'd throw a stone now and find a John, you know? So the Dagda we know as a title that is placed upon him. Now I know I'm covering a number of different things. I'm jumping around a little bit, but really what it comes down to is the fact that there are so many names and so many ways to identify the presence of the Dagda through the narratives that even though one version of the story says he died after 120 years carrying a wound from a battle in the middle of a war, he's also clearly said to have gone into the other world and provides like, rulership and support there. Later on during the Ulster cycle, actually, one of the other stories is the Aisling Angus, or the visions or dreams of Angus, the son of the Dagda, who falls into his love sickness over a woman from the other world. And in order to try and figure out who that is, first the druid goes to Boan, and Boan's like, I don't know who the fuck this person you're describing is. And then they go to the Dagda, and the Dagda's like, well, why are you asking me? Boan knows everyone I know. But then they say, listen, it's not we're not coming to the Dagda for his knowledge of who's who or his relationships with people in Ireland. It's his authority over the people in the other world as a king in the other world, which means that he has the authority to get answers and responses. So at that point, Boan, the Druid, the Dagda all go to Bov Jarag, and through Bov Jarag, the son of the Dagda, they go to the court of Maven Alleel, and there they find out that the person they're seeking is the daughter of the king of the Sidhe of Connacht. And he's there. He's throughout all of this narrative, but he's not centered in the narrative. His influence is still present. His influence is still supporting everyone else in the culture. And even though he's not at this point king in Ireland, he still is listed as having this authority over the kings in the other world that they have to listen to him. If the Dagda turns up for a conversation, they need to make space for him to have that conversation. Not that he can compel them or own them or force them to do, because the king of the Shia of Connacht is like, no, I'm not going to give you any fucking information, because he doesn't have to, but he has to at least host and meet with the Dagda. So did the Dagda take on traits of other deities or smaller deities, and that's why he's not recognized? I personally would say no, but I would say that there are such a broad expression of the Dagda, his abilities, his themes, his culture, his connection with other people, and the many names and aspects of him, because he's not a singular fronted deity of a harvest or a god of one thing or a god of the other things. He's a god of pretty much everything, which is why he has the name Sabil Donach, which is again Ildonach being him of the many interlinked talents, which is most commonly linked with Lu, but the Savildonic is also linked with the Dagda, so it's almost that he has mastery of these many interlinked talents in many ways. Now, I'm gonna Dagda bias up front. Absolutely. He is the god that I am sworn to and work to, but he also supports and inspires me in so many different ways. I don't think that Dagda went anywhere. The narrative of it all shows that he went into the other world even after he's supposed to have died of a wound. His presence is still felt, it's still kind of shown. And this is where we get into the latter part of questioning the integrity of our sources, shall we say. Now, a lot of the stories, the early stories were written down by Christian monks. Now, we're delighted to fucking have them. Ireland was an oral tradition in the past, and if it wasn't for the fact that these oral stories were transcribed, then the eradication of Irish culture by colonization and invasion would mean that we wouldn't have any of this content. So we're very grateful. I'm personally very grateful to have this volume of inspiring and insightful kind of content to look into. But then I have to ask the question, when you have an individual, a deity, a pagan deity in Ireland, whose literal translation of his name, the Dagda, is the goodly God, how is someone who is a Christian monk supposed to balance themselves while writing this down, if not to either fictionize it or twist some of the caricature elements to debase him in some way, or fudge the naming and just don't write it down. And we actually see this later on, or actually during the mythological cycle, during on the run up to this second Battle of Mytora, this hugely important part of the saga. The Dagda leaves the meeting of the men and the goddess. He travels all the way across Ireland to seek prophetic knowledge about the arrival of the Fomorians. The person he goes to meet is said to be the woman. He meets a woman, and she is red, like robed and red tresses, and she's unbinding her hair, standing and washing herself on a ford, and they bind together, they couple in the ford, and the ford is known as the bed of the couple thereafter. And all of this is given. The woman then speaks prophecy about the arrival of, and it's the woman, the woman, the woman, the descriptor, descriptor, descriptor in the story. And it's only at the end in brackets that someone shoved in, and the woman was the Morrigan. It's almost like the the monk laboriously writing this down is like, Well, I can't say it's a goddess. I can't mention that they're deities. I need to in some way get and they're just scribing in, and this is scratchings with quills and ink on vellum skin. So it's not like I'll just lash it down with a biro and whatever else. This is a laborious act. And so the individual still felt like the need to put that name in there, to actually validate by naming who the woman was. Now we know the spiritual text of Christianity is very much anti-women in many ways, shapes, and form. And the whole original sin, Eve, etc., Mary Magdalene, etc. Like there are so many different fucking problems with all of that. It's understandable that some of that bias may bleed over into the sources that we're looking at. So the fact that we're able to point to where narratives are very clearly biased indicates that some of the narratives were rather faithfully written down. But that does mean that it's possible that the names of the Dagda or the names of his multiplicity of names were not recorded in some of the stories in the later stories because they couldn't afford to have a goodly God appearing and dealing in divine power, divine providence in the midst of these narratives. So it's a great question. It's a very interesting one. It's one that I have struggled with personally when I started my own journey trying to find the Dagda. All of this started for me as a journey of who the fuck is the Dagda and where do I find him? And it was that question that started me on this road years and years ago. And it hasn't been easy. It's been reading everything I can. It's been kind of trying to chase it back and also being skeptical about it and not just allowing for Dagda colored glasses to just define every tall, built red man out there as the Dagda. But some part of me, following the expression of my spirituality, makes space for those inspiration moments, those connection to the collective unconsciousness, or imbos farasna, in as the ancient bards would say, the inspiration or connection to greater knowledge. And so yeah, hopefully this has been an answer to the question. I do feel it's a little bit rambly, but the Dagda story for me didn't end, never ended. And my experiences working towards right relationship with the Dagda have shown me that even in the most troubling, darkest, and difficult times of the Irish people, the Dagda never went anywhere. And even when his name was not spoken on this land, and even when people couldn't feed themselves for the atrocities that were being done against the Irish people, he didn't go anywhere. Um, and I am speaking from, again, personal gnosis, personal experience, personal spiritual connection. I have come close to touching the Dagda's grief at the loss of people, of Irish people on the island of Ireland. And it's huge and it's saddening. Um, but he endured. He stayed. He maintained his relationship even when no one else remembered or said his name on the island. He didn't stop doing the work. And so that is why part of my commitment to my spiritual practice with him is to say his name out loud on the island of Ireland, because for a long while it was not said at all. And power is in names. Names have power. Names have a way of defining and identifying things so that we can see them, we can perceive them, we can acknowledge them, we can respect them, we can connect with them. So even though Big Red Man or anything else may appear in the narratives, it's worth saying the names and being aware of the impact that we have of energy and resonance as we vocalize those things in our day-to-day life. Thank you very much for the question. I really do appreciate it. It's a great one. And thanks to all of the people who support us over in our Patreon. If you would like to know more, there's literally a free class on the Dagda at the Irish Pagan School, domestic deity and hearth hero. Because unlike other gods out there, he's not the, oh yeah, blah, 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 I'm a big fucking deal guy. He's the come here, sit down, have a sandwich deity. He's the one who's like there for people where they need him to be. in my personal experience and as we have seen in the mythology. But I invite everyone to take a class, look at the information, read a story, listen to me talk about it because I have been doing it for years now, and I don't think I'll ever stop. Right. Listen, Gurv Margotts, thank you very, very much. Look after yourself, and until next time, Slán. Goodbye.